Then There's California, a podcast featuring members of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus in conversation about their lives, their legislative priorities, policies, and other related issues that help make California exceptional. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. It's been said that the 26th annual United Nations Climate Conference of Parties in Glasgow, Scotland in early November, or COP26 as it was informally called, is where world leaders go to make a reputation for themselves as climate leaders. COP26 was also an opportunity for California policymakers, representing the world's fifth largest economy, to boldly assert California's already impressive leadership on climate, while continuing to embrace an ambitious timeline for climate action. Among the attendees at COP26 this year was a 23-member official delegation from California, including 5 members of the California State Senate, who came to Glasgow with their own collective and individual climate policy portfolios, eager to tell the world about California's historic climate policies, while also stopping to listen and learn about what other nations and other nation-states are doing on that platform. On this edition of Then There's California, we're joined by the entire 5-member State Senate delegation to COP26, who, in the weeks since they have returned to California, have been reflecting on the meetings and dialogues and new ideas that they exchanged in Scotland, and how their enthusiasm and climate policy goals will inform and frame their environmental legislation into the 2022 legislative session, which begins in January. Proud to introduce State Senator Robert Hertzberg of Van Nuys in the 18th Senate District, our Senate Majority Leader, and for many years he's been known as a global clean energy entrepreneur. Senator Hertzberg, it's your birthday actually today as we speak. Happy birthday, and welcome back to Then There's California.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian, and there couldn't be anything better I can do on my birthday than talk about this issue.
And we welcome State Senator John Laird of Santa Cruz, who represents California's 17th Senate District. Prior to joining the state Senate this year, Senator Laird was former Governor Jerry Brown's director of California's Natural Resources Agency. Senator Laird, welcome back to Then There's California.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Brian.
And we're glad to have back State Senator Lena Gonzalez of Long Beach in California's 33rd Senate District. Senator Gonzalez is the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. Senator Gonzalez, welcome back to Then There's California.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Brian. It's great to be back.
And State Senator Bob Wieckowski of Fremont. He is in California's 10th Senate District. He chairs the Budget and Fiscal Review Subcommittee on Resources, Environmental Protection, and Energy in the state Senate. Senator Wieckowski, welcome back.
Brian, it's always my pleasure to be on your show.
And joining us for the first time here on Then There's California, State Senator Josh Becker of Menlo Park in California's 13th Senate District, a public policy innovator working at the nexus of community activism, technology, and social justice. He's also the author of a blog called Getting to Zero, a term I know he will elaborate on in the course of this conversation. Senator Becker, welcome to Then There's California.
Thank you for having me. First time.
Yes, and I hope not the last time either. All right, folks, very glad to have you here. And actually, we'll start ladies first with the first question. So, Senator Lena Gonzalez, I'll open with you. The significance and potential impact of the COP26 conference was described as both global and personal. So what does that description mean to you in the context of your reflections of your time in Glasgow?
Yeah, absolutely. This is my first COP, obviously, and being that it was COP26 in Glasgow was really exciting. I mean, especially coming from California and on the heels of so many different issues that we're dealing with back at home. So it's global in the sense that, going there and meeting with so many incredible partners internationally and being able to collaborate with them and talk through many ideas, listening more than talking really is what I did. And then coming back home and seeing the impact. I came home and actually had a neighborhood cleanup and tree planting. And so climate change is all around us. And even though COP26 dealt with a lot of policies, I think in the implementation phase, people are really thinking about it back at home when it comes to extreme heat, high rates of chronic disease due to air pollution, land contamination, oil spills, right in our backyard. So there's a lot to digest. It's been 10 hours plus in a flight, and then to be back home was really, just incredible. But again, it's really in the minds of folks. Even if it seems like low-hanging fruit, climate change is the hot topic all around us throughout the state.
Senator Robert Hertzberg, our Senate Majority Leader, what is your response to that global versus personal notion?
Well, I got to tell you, we politicians draw these artificial lines in the air, and we call them cities and states and counties and countries. The globe is one place. What happens in one part of the globe affects others. In the place that I represent in Los Angeles, 30% of the particulate matter that's sitting in the harbor comes from those ships coming in. So this is a global problem. It's extraordinary. And the other thing I want to say that makes it personal is Senator Murkowski and I a couple of years ago went to Poland, and we were the only Americans there because there was a previous administration that didn't support the Paris Accords. And Senator Murkowski speaks Polish, so he snuck me in across the border to get into Poland. And it was a qualitatively different experience where, with the fact that there was such a strong presence, not just from the federal government, from our state, from a number of other states. And I think that the energy level and the commitment, both from the private sector and from whether cities or counties or regions and the like, that the story is not just about what happened in China and India and Russia and the United States, but it really is an extraordinary level of attention and energy and commitment, which excited the heck out of me.
And Senator Wieckowski, I'll let you take it from there. What's your reaction in terms of the global and personal impact of this?
Well, I think, the COP, the Conference of Parties, is really a once-in-a-lifetime, totally unique activity that we've been doing now for 26 times to try to get all the parties together to reach unanimity, to agree on something. We can comment that blah, 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 it's not enough. We're all on this call because we have greater aspirations and ambitions to do things. But the fact that they can agree on anything and recognize that this crisis is truly a crisis, sometimes we don't sit back for a second and pause to say that that's worth our effort and continuing to work. And that commitment, even coming out of the communique that they gave, that they're going to come back next year in Egypt and tighten up these commitments, is an opportunity to open the door for bilateral conversations. We all know that there'll be United States and India and Russia, the EU and Australia, discussions on coal and methane and the steps we have to take. On a personal level, I want to do everything I can to help California reduce their greenhouse gases. And when you sit at these conferences, it is inspiring to go into a plenary session, but also the buzz that goes on when you hear and you're there with your colleagues and you're talking and you say they reached an agreement on methane. 100 nations are going to reduce it by 30%. It's the growth and the acceptance of other nations taking actions, and then we're being able to come back with some of this enthusiasm or some of these policies and make them applicable here in California.
Terrific. And Senator Becker, your reflections on this question.
Yeah, well, it was wonderful to be there. Just the content, the connections, everywhere you turned, on the train, on the bus. You meet someone interesting who was working in this field in some way, shape, or form. And I think we were really there for two purposes. To show that it can be done, and the leadership that California has shown, that Senator Hertzberg, Senator Wieckowski, and other colleagues were integral parts of all that we've reduced our emissions per capita by 20% while growing our economy 60%. So showing how it can be done, but also to get the best ideas from around the world, from other states, to bring them back to California, because there's other areas where other people are leading and that we can learn from them. And it's all about moving faster. And California has to be the engine for the United States. The United States is moving too slow, as is the rest of the world. And California has to continue to lead and be that source of policy innovation as well as technology innovation because of all of our great companies here. So it just was a wonderful, wonderful trip.
Senator John Laird, what is your comment on that?
Well, the Glasgow conference was global in the sense that 200 nations were trying to hammer out an agreement, and they did, and I wish it was stronger, but it's good we have it. But at the local level, California really has a lot to offer other people, and we also have some to learn. So I went with 4 other assembly members and took a 6-hour train trip ride and took a boat out into the North Sea and went to see the Scottish offshore floating windmills, which generate renewable energy. And it was a great experience because one of the 2 places that is proposed in California for this is off of Morro Bay, which is in my district. And it was really good to see exactly how it works, what the impacts will be, and how locally we can make sure it happens.
Well, I did get the sense that part of the California delegation's mission, and you've touched on this, was to tout and share best practices about California's progressive climate achievements to date, And as Senator Becker, as you put it, to show the world it can be done and also how it can be done, but also to observe and listen and learn in humility about the work that other nations and nation states are achieving that are equal to or eclipsing California's record. Homework time, as Senator Hertzberg called it. So I guess starting with you again, Senator Hertzberg, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is homework time. It's the offshore 18 megawatt, 20 megawatt wind turbines, whether they're in Portugal or whether they're off the north coast of Scotland, that are just extraordinary, right? It's the understanding of what the Scottish people called a skills passport to train people as they move to other jobs that are critical to the economy. It's meetings that we had on new kinds of airline fuels that are renewables. It's as much as the countries, it's this unbelievable synergy that comes on with private companies that are there that are trying to sell their wares. But it's interesting because they've got a lot of new creative approaches to doing things that we might have otherwise thought about. It's the sharing of the experiences that I think both Senator Becker and Senator Rakowski and Senator Gonzalez and Laird, you gain from talking to others. We talked to Mexico, what I know, Germany, and the Assembly, and we talked to all these other countries. You know, and I've been all over the world working on this stuff, but I don't think I've ever seen this level of commitment and energy and dedication. And the speeches by these young kids saying, don't ruin my damn world. There is no planet B. It's not just Greta. It's a whole bunch of them. And it gets to you, and it inspires you. And they do it in every language and color and ethnicity and circumstance. And you see that we, as I said in Poland with Senator Rakowski, I can't wait till the Martians come, because then we're all going to be just Earthlings, and we're all got this together.
And Senator Rakowski, is Senator Hertzberg's reaction there contagious to you?
Oh, yes. I mean, I was on a panel on extreme water-related events with some Scottish folks and a guy from the EPA in New York, an international engineering firm. So it was really inspiring to figure out what they were doing, and then we reevaluated. I mean, I think that California's water usage through conservation has dropped. In 2020, it's dropped below 2014 levels. And we just did a budget that put more money into conservation and other water recycling, sort of tried and true things, to get that number down, because we have a drought. It's here. We're going to be arid no matter what we do. And the other folks talking about how they're reacting to extreme flooding and these extreme levels. It's a marketplace of ideas, and they're right. I come back and I see Director Randolph from the Air Board, and so I saw Felicia Marcus, who used to be the Water Resource Board, and we have those conversations that help solidify it and then help modify and flesh out what will work here in California.
And Senator Becker.
Yeah, I agree with what was said. I mean, we were received very well because people are appreciative of California's leadership. But, as was mentioned, there's just a lot that we can learn as well. And Senator Hertzberg mentioned offshore wind. Senator Rakowski, Senator Gonzalez has been really digging into some of the workforce training and skills transition piece that we learned about there. On hydrogen, there was great sessions on sustainable aviation fuel. I mean, there was just so much there. What other states are doing. Washington State passed the Cap and Invest plan that basically looked at our cap and trade and the lessons from 10 plus years and really improved upon it. Now they want to link up with us. So we spent a lot of time with them, and Senator Rakowski really looking at that, how we can use that to really improve our cap and trade system as well. So, yeah, just a lot of really, really useful conversations across the board.
Senator Laird?
Well, that's exactly right, because California has really taken the lead among the 50 states. I was in the legislature when Assembly Bill 32 was adopted, and it really took the Kyoto Accords, which was the equivalent of the Glasgow Agreement at the time, and put them into law in California as our federal government walked away from them. And we met those. We lowered our emissions to the 1990 level by our 2020 goal 4 years early, while the economy is booming. So it was a message to everybody around the world that you can do what everybody pledges to do in goals, and it actually helps the economy and boosts it. So the California message was really clear. At the same time, there are other places in the world that are doing things that we haven't quite done. We're looking at what people are doing for oceans in other places to try to mitigate against ocean acidification and start to deal with the impacts of sea level rise. And so there were plenty of things that we could learn from other countries, even though we were a model for how to reduce emissions against world goals ourselves.
Senator Lena Gonzalez, your comments.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what I wanted to do when I went to COP, was to sit back and listen. Yes, we're the fifth largest economy, and it's very clear when I was at COP26 that California was looked at as a very progressive climate leader, that everyone looks to California for that leadership and guidance and essentially a climate change playbook. I mean, when we were there was an MOU between 15 countries that basically was trying to outdo California in terms of the in-state sales of zero-emission cars and ensuring that there was that framework for that, and going 5 years faster than California and mandating by 2040 versus 2045. And so there is a sort of friendly competition, but it's also a place for us, as I mentioned before, even though, we're one of the largest economies, to sit back and listen, because there's so much to learn, even from the smaller developing countries, from larger countries, from other states. I mean, there was incredible collaboration going on, and I think, we have a lot to be humble about, as you mentioned, in regards to that.
Well, in fact, I know you came with a lot of expectations on your shoulders to promote California and to talk about ways California is changing its own plans, trying to meet deadlines that have been set here in the state. But also one of the additional expectations was that the California delegation could have time to talk and share with each other beyond the ebb and flow of the conference as legislative and government colleagues, away from committee and bill deadline pressure, away from third house or stakeholder pressure, even though a lot of those stakeholders and third house folks were also in attendance. Did that happen? I mean, you guys have reflected on this already a little bit. Well, you know how it is when we go to these kind of conferences, when you go with people, you get to know them better, you bond, you have the shared experience. Did you get that with your colleagues in that same way?
Yes, we did. We did connect, very briefly with our assembly colleagues, but mostly we connected, I think our Senate delegation connected with the Newsom administration. So Secretary Wade Crowfoot, which was great, and a lot of his staff was there. We, went to a local pub and just kind of hung out and just chatted.
That's great.
It was really nice to be able to do that, and not in the environment of, that is so structured. It was just an environment of us just getting to know one another, of course, a little bit better, but also talking about the good work that we are doing. So I think it was really great to be able to connect on a more organic level like that.
Senator Hertzberg.
Well, let me tell you why that's so important. The Pro Tem Atkins brought a bunch of us together to really focus on climate change. I think you're going to see a big priority for the Senate and the Assembly next year on climate change. And so we met before we left. And then now we're over there with a mission, not just a broad mission, but like, okay, what's our legislative agenda? So what Senator Gonzalez said is exactly correct. I mean, I flew over with her. I flew back with her. Spent a huge amount of time talking about issues and dozens of meetings. So I do think that is exactly right. And I think that in addition to that, it involved the practical aspect of us figuring out what we want to do, sharing our ideas, Senator Becker's ideas on cement and carbon capture and other issues that are really important. So I think it was a really important step moving forward for us in putting together an agenda for next year.
Senator Laird?
Yes, we spent some quality time together, and one of the interesting things is there weren't enough hotel rooms just to accommodate every convention goer in Glasgow. And so we, along with other delegations, stayed in Edinburgh, which was a 45-minute express train ride away. We spent times on the trains with some assembly members, with all the senators all the time, in a way that, in addition to just going from meeting to meeting together or being in meals together or being at events together, we were able to really compare notes. And if you went to a meeting or had a discussion, I remember one on biofuels, when we walked to the next meeting, we really compared notes to what we learned and what happened. In addition, my successor as Secretary for Natural Resources, I had a chat with, because we were in the same place. I had a meal with the head of the Air Board, who just happens to be my former general counsel at the Resources Agency. So we were really able to talk about what they're going to do, what the role of the legislature is, how it's going, in an informal way that we might not have been able to find the time to do if we were in Sacramento together.
And Senator Wieckowski.
Yeah, I mean, I had breakfast every morning with Senator Hertzberg and Senator Laird. So we spend time talking about what we wanted to see that was on the agenda, what we wanted to work with, and then sharing those ideas. So I think that helps us when we come back now, as the majority leader was indicating. We're going to come up with our plan. I'm sure with this budget surplus, the governor has their plan, but to have those conversations.
And finally, Senator Becker.
Yeah, it was a huge benefit of it just to get to spend, because we're up here, we're all busy, running around, lots of events, and to be all together and focused and having meals and having the train ride. And we did a walking tour around Edinburgh. But yeah, just to have the time to really, in those moments, collectively reflect on what we learned and what we want to take back was just fantastic.
Well, and yes,
everybody wants to be nicey in these calls, but I'm going to bellyache a little bit to give a little bit of reality to this. You have no idea how fast Bob Wieckowski walks, right? I counted 95,000 steps on this trip. I walked more miles on this trip than I've walked in months. And trying to keep up with Wieckowski when he's trying to catch the train is pretty tough. So we have a good time, but boy, that son of a gun walks fast.
See, that was my point. You guys learn a lot about each other when you're in these close quarters of conferences, right?
Yeah, those are the things to sit and kibitz around, fried haggis and Scottish beer. That was also a big positive.
Well, Senator Wieckowski, in addition to walking fast, it sounds like you and others had the pleasure of seeing a California solar thermal energy company receive a significant financial prize. You and your colleagues were in attendance for that. So that was kind of a nice thing to be able to give some extra California recognition there in Scotland to another company from California.
Yeah, I mean, the Kiwi Curve Prize, which many listeners may not have heard of it, but the 2021 prize, there were 3,000 nonprofits and others that applied for it, and 10 people got the award. So California, Sacramento's Solar Cookers International received it, and my colleagues were there at the presentation, as was the Keeler Curve representatives that were there, and it's pretty low-tech project. It's that, a solar energy looks like a aluminum box, but so many women and children that are burning peat or burning coal or burning wood and inhaling all the emissions from high carbon fuel that we eliminate that. And it's nice in a small way to shine the spotlight on. I mean, Brian, just to add on to that, we're in Katowice, Poland, and we're walking into a session. I think we had a press conference, and these folks were outside saying, Senator Wieckowski, can we talk to you? We're from California, and we have this product here we want to show you. And you think, I had to come all the way to Poland to find out about this California business, but they're there in the COP saying, here's another thing that we can do. Can you folks, the delegates that are there, the people with the credentials in the blue zone, can you help us make this happen on scale, that other people can get it in a seamless way? So it was nice.
Anyone else have any reflections on or takeaways from COP26 that they want to share? Senator Laird.
Well, there are some specific ideas that I have taken out of Glasgow, and I think I want to talk to my colleagues and see what the possibilities are. But the real thing is that it motivated even more members of the public, and it motivated even more the legislators that were attending. And I think one of the key things to come out of Glasgow is intangible. It is the motivation and the will and the desire to make sure that we try to meet this challenge. And I think that's what really came out of Glasgow. And I've been back a few days as we record this, and I am talking to lots of people, and they're like, what are we going to do out of this? How are we going to push it? How are we going to make sure we rise to the challenge? And I think that is a good thing to come from this.
Senator Gonzalez?
Oh, gosh, there were so many memorable takeaways, but I think one memorable takeaway, I think, was meeting with the Scottish Parliament. We met with about 3 ministers who all came from different parts of Scotland. But I think for me, as chair of transportation, kind of getting an idea from their perspective on what they view as zero emission. I mean, here in California, we look at zero emission in so many different ways. I mean, are you battery electric, in the hydrogen space, renewable natural gas, there's even biodiesel. I mean, there's just so many different spaces that kind of equate to near zero or zero emission. And so I know Scotland has this huge plan for hydrogen. They're creating this huge hydrogen network for blue hydrogen that will then hopefully turn to green hydrogen, less emitting fuel. And so they're really taking this space up in the hydrogen space, especially as it pertains to medium heavy duty trucks. And so that for me was something to take away, and kind of looking at their plans and all of the both public and private investments that have gone into these plans for a zero emission future.
This is great to hear. And Senator Becker, I know you and your colleagues participated in a couple of different press conferences while you were there, and you yourself had the opportunity to talk about your new Getting to Zero legislation that you want to introduce when your colleagues come back in January. So talk to us about that and the context of introducing that in Glasgow.
Yeah, well, I was there actually as a delegate of the Climate Center, so they asked me to take that spot. And yeah, in terms of legislation, as Senator Hertzberg said, really this year will be about working collectively and coming up with a package. The thing about this is, the thing that makes it hard and also exciting and a great opportunity, it's really remaking every aspect of our economy. I mean, that's what we have to do, every aspect of our economy. So it's not going to be one bill or one thing that's going to solve this. We really need a package, and we're all going to figure that out collectively. But, I was talking more about some of California's progress, as we talked about, and some of the things that we have to do along those. We've been decreasing our emissions by 1% a year, which is great. But to meet our 2030 goal, we have to reduce 4% a year, and we'll do that 25 straight years to hit our 2045 goal. So we got our work cut out for us. One thing that I mentioned in that event that got some pickup is just this notion that let's have our state government lead the way. It'll help all of the efforts that we'll be working on this year and in the past. So if the state can get to net zero by 2035, it'll provide impetus in many areas. For our fleet of 50,000 plus vehicles, great. We'll electrify or find other ways to decarbonize them. Our building, that will help bring down the cost of clean building technologies. Buying concrete and cement, low carbon. We did the regulatory push side last year. Now we need demand pull side, since the state buys 40% of the concrete and cement. So that was one thing that mentioned I think can be hopefully helpful to all of our combined efforts as one of the kind of demand drivers, right? Because we'll have the regulatory side, but then we also need to make sure that we speed the adoption of all these technologies. So, happy to share that and get some good feedback during the conference.
When we talk about California's climate leadership reputation, some of the reviews actually have been mixed lately, even from your own colleagues in the legislature. One of your assembly colleagues said the bloom has come off the rose, so to speak, on California's climate leadership. Even Assembly Speaker Rendon was quoted as saying, I don't feel at all that we are leading the world anymore, that other cities and countries are outperforming us. Paris is ahead of us. Germany is ahead of us. India is ahead of us. Scotland is ahead of us. And even you, Senator Laird, had said 2021 specifically wasn't necessarily a great year for climate legislation. Everybody thought our goals were robust, but the impact, some say, of climate change has gotten ahead of those goals. So are those sobering critiques realistic?
I think it's a very nuanced issue, and the nuanced issue is that we are ahead of most of the world in what we are doing in California, but the climate crisis is rapidly approaching a major tipping point. And as good as we are, and as much a leader as we are, we have to do more to deal with how fast the changing climate is moving. And so we're in the lead, but we're not doing enough. And I think that's the nuance of the situation. And this past year in the legislature, we did a great job through the budget. In particular, Senator Wojtkowski led us on fire, on water, on various things that are mitigations to climate change. But when it came to policy of trying to tighten the screws to do more, that's where we came up a little short this year. And I think we are redoubling our efforts for next year. We are talking to each other intensively, and we're looking for that kind of common ground to meet this challenge. Senator
Hertzberg, what do you think about that?
I'm a contrarian on that. I don't believe that. I believe that when you look at the $15 billion that we put in this budget, it's extraordinary. I think that the few bills that caught some noise on that, I think got caught up in interest groups and didn't really deal with the underlying issues. I left government in 2002 and spent most of the 12 years working in this space all around the planet. I'm pretty aware of what's been going on around the planet. And I got to tell you, as Mr. Wachowski, Senator Wachowski will tell you, one of the largest exports is Tesla's, which is in his communities that he represents in Fremont. Those are big things. The numbers that we're being able to hit are extraordinary. I think that things like, okay, do we make a decision where they're going to give one of our government agencies authority to go to 2045? Was that the standard? I was a contrarian on that. And I believe that we should move away from what we did in 2006 that says, oh, we're going to give these bureaucratic agencies more authority, and we should do the kind of things that Becker's doing on cement. We should do stuff that we've talked about with Senator Wachowski on methane. We should be doing directly things like green hydrogen. And so when you looked at the arguments that were being made about that made a lot of the headlines, the fact of the matter is the probative question is one thing. Are we reducing GHGs? What Senator Becker just said, 20% down, economy up 60%. Big deal. Look at the investments in electric vehicles and all the various things that we're doing going forward. At the end of the day, it's putting money toward it, and the amount of money that we put toward it that came through Senator Wachowski's committee, among others, is nothing less than extraordinary. So I do think that there was some press issues around that, but I don't think as somebody who's a serious student in this area that is really accurate.
Senator Wachowski, are the reviews accurate or not?
Well, I mean, I deal with the budget. I think, it's not that simple. People like to see these clear resolutions to problems. And, you say we're going to cut our emissions by 100%. It's how do you deal with it? How do you go from 22 to 23 to 24? If there's a fire burning, people say, let's see it put out. The building's destroyed, let's rebuild it. Well, climate change is different. The carbon that we're releasing right now is not going to take effect until 2050. That's an abstract concept, and all the changes of the weird weather we're having now are legacy stuff. So there's no point where people just get up and say, okay, we solved it. It's done. It's going to take years of actions, and we fight over the expenditures of programs that we have, and we're not waiting for Washington. California is we're on our own track. We're learning from different states, and we're getting incentives and energy from different states. And again, we'll go back to the tediousness that we're going to figure out how to address our methane problem. Coming back from Glasgow, we have to say, let me take another look at this. Let me see what else are we doing in the feed that we can give the cattle, and the dairy can eat some seaweed. And, that's 20% of California's methane emissions. Refineries, and everybody wants to shut down the refineries and do that. That's 3%. Where's the other 97%, folks, that what makes a headline and you can have a march, but what are we going to do that we're sitting here this time next year and saying we can measure the short-term climate matter that's in the air and being emitted, and it's reduced because of these investments we're making.
And can I just add something to that real quickly before Senator Becker comes up? And that is, I had my interns in the office take a look at all these car companies. 41% of the emissions, the carbon emissions, are tailpipe emissions. Okay, we got to get rid of them. Well, Mercedes is going all electric in 2025. Ford just invested $22 million. We looked at Honda and Nissan and all the new cars that are coming out by 2030 that all are electric. Well, what's the measurement of those numbers based upon reducing tailpipe emissions on policies that we started, let alone all the money that Senator Wachowski put in and others on zero-emission vehicles? So these are policies that we started. You're going to see over the next 5 years have a dramatic impact in reduction of tailpipe emissions because we're changing this stuff out. I want to come back and come up with some subsidy program, cash for clunkers, where we can buy people's cars, get them a subsidized electric vehicle, so that electrical vehicles aren't just for rich people and Teslas, but that the benefits of the environmental impacts are affected by all strata of society. But there's some significant changes that are in the process of being made. They're just not so fancy to say, oh, I'm going to 100% of this and 100% of that for these long outward goals of back into the future when we're going to be long gone.
And Senator Becker, your response on this, I know you have had a career in this climate environmental platform way before you joined the Senate this last year. So what's your take on the mixed reviews and everything that your colleagues have said here about what California has been doing?
Yeah, I think everything they said is accurate and strong. And, listen, we all need to move faster. Everyone does. California is clearly leading the country, but that doesn't mean, obviously, that we can rest because of the task ahead, because it is every aspect of the economy we have to move faster too. And sometimes we have to move faster just because everyone else is moving slower. The rest of the country, it's tough to get this kind of legislation passed at the federal level. Anyway, bottom line is, we do need to move faster. I think that's what we're all determined to do this year, is to keep pushing the envelope. And as I said, we go from reducing 1% a year to 4% a year. That's a big, big jump.
Senator Lena Gonzalez, what is your response?
I'm never going to take away someone's personal experience and what they feel. And I've been in the legislature for 2.5 years, so I have very limited scope on the state level. But what I can say overall is that some of it seems like sort of inside baseball, that sometimes we're being a little too harsh on ourselves, because when you go to this global stage and you say, I am a California state senator, I mean, automatically the eyes light up completely from our global colleagues, from the UK, from Washington, Hawaii, from interstate relationships, and people know that California is a leader. And that is just not a factor. I think everyone knows that we're a leader. I think, again, we're hard on ourselves in that sense that we know we need to do more, because we are looked at in this world stage. And do we need to do more? Absolutely. I think that now that you have more collaboration with many states, like 15 countries coming together in an MOU saying that we're going to ban in-state sales of fossil fuel cars by 2030 and 2040 versus the 2035 and 2045 that California is putting forward. Actually, I mean, we should feel flattered, that we're starting that framework, and many other countries are building off of that.
Right.
I mean, again, do we need to do more? Yes, we absolutely do, and I think it starts with us. And so I don't think it's enough to have goals and then not catch up to those goals. We also have to ensure that, and that's why it's great that the administration was there and a lot of our regulatory members, to be able to say it's not just a legislative path. We also have to take regulatory paths. We also have to have industry involved. It's not just us. I mean, the California government can't do it all. What I also learned is that corporate responsibility is very important in this whole climate change factor. And so I know a lot of corporations were there, and we're also committed to saying the goals aren't enough, but we know we need to do more. So we're setting our own goals within our own business policies and business frameworks to be able to hit those goals at an even faster pace, to outpace the government even.
Senator Gonzalez, a question for you directly, if your colleagues will oblige me. A thorough discussion of climate change leadership should include the impact of climate change on communities of color around the world, who often contribute minimally to the climate change problem, but are affected the most by it. And then there's the significance of your presence at the conference as an elected Latina state official representing communities of color in your own district, and by extension, the rest of California, who have often been oppressed and ignored and impacted when it comes to climate policy. Did your presence and your role on this international stage compel you or motivate you and weigh on your shoulders and heart?
That's a great question. Absolutely. I think coming from the 710 communities, the Port of Long Beach, who is a renowned green port, it was even discussed by one of our consulate general members in Edinburgh that Long Beach is looked at as a green port. Well, because we obviously have a lot of emissions going on at the port. We've got 710 communities, diesel trucks, exide with soil and water contamination. So it was very heavy on me. So going there, absolutely, that was at the forefront. The fact that I was even there was, again, for my community, to ensure that I was understanding the global dynamic, but also bringing home homework for myself to actually start legislating and implementing some ideas. And you see it in the global stage as well, when you see countries within the continent of Africa talking about equity in terms of finance. They're not getting enough financing by global partners, but they're asked to do just as much as some of the rich countries. And so you're kind of seeing the inequities. It sort of seems the same, here back at home. Many of my community feels like, hey, we don't get enough state funding to remediate a lot of these issues, but we're asked to do the same. So it was the same sort of parallel that we see, again, back home. And so being there, I think, for me was really significant, to be a Latina leader and also meet with other countries. Like we were able to meet with the Mexican delegation,
right,
who were just asking us, hey, how can we work together on a binational level? And so we talked about Senator Wetzel's binational committee and how it would be great for that forum and that platform to be able to lift up the issue of climate change between California and Mexico, which I thought was a great idea.
As a final question, ladies and gentlemen, I know one of the challenges you have going forward from COP26 is further educating the public and your communities about what's at stake and rising above the sea of climate denialism out there and pushing back against what I call the autocrats, whether they're polluters or deniers, or even real autocrats across the world, all in whose best interest it is to try and thwart real progress and results on climate change policy. They all seem to have each other's backs in their efforts to do that. And do you, as California elected officials, now back from Glasgow, you are energized, you're ready to put dialogue and lessons learned from the conference into action? Do you have each other's backs in a way that will allow you to come back to Sacramento and turn the COP26 momentum into policy that can make a difference, that can pass out of committee and become law? Senator Hertzberg.
Yeah, I think we do. And I always look at this issue of climate change, and I always say that people in certain poor communities or in the Central Valley look at it and say, well, what's climate change? My air conditioner stopped working. Or I told a story on the floor of the Senate about someone in the communities that I represent says that they used to put socks in the freezer so that it was so hot in the trailers they lived in, they put a sock on their forehead and a sock on their belly to be able to sleep comfortably when they took it out of the freezer. A part of this issue is to deal with Senator Kowski referred to this earlier, but to make it relevant to people's lives. And part of that relevancy is not just climate change in terms of planning forward. And we did this in this budget, but climate change, extreme heat. What is the impact on people? Making it real to people and really try to understand it in a language that's beyond the theoretical and the metric tons and the blah, 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 but really impact people. And I would suggest figuring out ways that don't throw people out of work, that just piss them off, that creates the economy. That's why green hydrogen is so good, because it produces so many jobs. But to marry it with certain principles, not these pie-in-the-sky ideas that what does somebody know about electric grid or know about this, but what are the core values that we're trying to achieve in the context of dealing with this issue that's much more relatable to people and in a way that impacts and benefits their lives and doesn't take their job away or turn their life upside down. You know, how do you deal with those kinds of things? And we have to be very, very much on the ground and very practical in that respect. And I think you're going to see a lot of that conversation from all of us.
Great. Senator Wieckowski, your final thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we have each other's backs. I mean, we're always going to have tension in the years that I've been on the budget and EQ and in the legislature between treating the symptoms of climate, whether that's extreme heat or the air that we're breathing when we're having 16 massive fires, and then focusing on the cause. People want to have cooling centers and places to go to retreat when the fires are bad, but we only have so much money, and the other end is you do wildfire prevention and you clear out the excess timber and wood products or trees that are in the forest so that the forests aren't that bad. You repair your riparian wetlands in order to create sequestration and sink, but also to cool off your area so it doesn't put an air conditioner into your house, but you got a nature-based solution. So there's always going to be tension. The world has focused on the cost of pollution. It's not the front page of newspapers, but it will be. We got $31 billion extra in our budget. We're going to go back, and you got 15 of us that went to Glasgow. Everybody's got their little bit in the press, and you're saying, okay, now where does that reflect our priorities? What type of investments can we make that we couldn't, pairing it or marrying it with the infrastructure bill that they're passing and the reconciliation that's in front of the Senate right now, and saying, from a budget point of view, how can we get the biggest bang out of buck? Where does California, given the money that's coming from the federal government, how do we put that all together to say, wow, that moves the needle ahead? This takes care of, building the bridge on Highway 37, not in my district, not in Senator Becker's district, but that helps the health of the San Francisco Bay, and that has an impact, and have the courage and the thoughtfulness to say, we're going to do this and let the San Francisco Bay breathe again, and it's going to benefit all of us.
Senator Becker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are going to have each other's backs, and it's important because if there's just, one bill and one industry and one sector, we can get picked off, if we're working together and, we have a package of things, it's going to be easier to, row in the same direction and try to overcome opposition. Listen, these are big decisions. We're affecting big industries and certainly will be resistant. And to your question, yeah, it's important to have each other's back. And I think we will. But, because we're also going to do it in a thoughtful way. We're going to meet with everyone. The way we have the cement bill done, we actually worked with the industry. And came to great conclusions. So, we're going to meet with everyone. We're going to try to come up with things that really move the needle, but take into account the success of our California industry, but keep moving forward quickly.
Senator Gonzalez.
I think this is one of the quintessential question. I think it's the most important question because nothing can get done unless we are lockstep in sync. I think we all know, obviously, climate change is real. We know we need to do something, but what is that going to look like? And you're right. How are we going to have each other's backs in this most critical time as extreme heat is happening and inequities with people of color and again, diesel, particulate matter and NOx and SOx coming out of our ports, et cetera? What I've learned is that the collaboration piece is so very important. And so that means collaboration from California, being collaborative with other states, but also collaboration amongst Senate colleagues. And I think we have a very strong group of legislators, my colleagues who went to COP26 with me, to really be able to work together on bold legislation. So we're in the process of strategy at this moment, and I really do feel that COP26 sort of solidified a lot of that collaboration, and also the Senate working group has really pushed the envelope as well. So I think we're headed into a good 2022. It's going to be hard, but I think it's the 2022 that we're ready for because we know what is ahead and we know the work that we have to get done. We have the homework in place. We've got the knowledge. Now it's just time to execute.
And Senator Laird, as the former head of the State Natural Resources Agency, I'll give you the final answer to this final question.
I think we do have each other's back. And the interesting thing is while there might be disinformation, there's reality. In the waning weeks of me being Natural Resources Secretary, the Paradise Fire happened, and it moved at 60 acres a minute. You could not outrun it. And the 2017 Tubbs fire that burned from outside of Calistoga to Santa Rosa moved in roughly 6 hours over that span. And there was a fire in the same footprint in 1964 that took 2.5 days. And so you can go with disinformation all you want, but the reality is this is happening and people can see it. And I also mentioned when I was talking in Glasgow that at the time I was Resources Secretary, Lake Tahoe was heating faster than almost any freshwater lake on the face of the planet because the snowpack would usually melt into Tahoe. It would circulate the water. It would keep the bottom cool. And the absence of the snowpack was heating the lake. And so there are these things that no matter what the disinformation is, match up against people's reality. And the reality is this is happening, and it is happening right in front of them. And so that is how we will have each other's back, is to make sure that we tell those stories, that we call out what people actually see, and we work together to address it.
Senators, thank you all so much for finding the time to come together and talk about your experiences at COP26 in November and what's ahead for climate policy in 2022. I really appreciate your reflections and perspectives on this sobering but also enlightening issue that affects all of us. I'm glad you are back safely home. I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thanks for joining us, State Senator Robert Hertzberg, John Laird, Bob Wykowski, Lena Gonzalez, and Josh Becker, the delegation to COP26 in Scotland. Thank you all for being with us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Brian.
Thanks for doing this, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Always appreciate it.
And that does wrap up this edition of Then There's California. Proud to have technical and production assistance and great ideas from Martin Ashley, Bob Bruelty, Brian Shadden, and Rainier Sabiniano, McClenna Woods, and the graphic design artistry of Tim Davis. I'm Brian Green from the state capitol in Sacramento. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Then There's California.